I never expected my own family to treat me like a stranger, but sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who raised you. It happened at my father's retirement dinner. The room was filled with relatives, colleagues, and old friends. They toasted, laughed, shared stories about his glory days. And then came the final speech. He stood up, tapped his glass, and began. I wouldn't be where I am today without the support of my family, and especially my son, Ryan. He's always been there. He's my legacy. My mother nodded proudly. My uncles clapped. My brother, sitting 2 seats away from me, grinned like he just won a medal. Then someone asked about me. My dad chuckled. Elena, she's doing something in finance. She's always been a bit distant. But Ryan takes care of us. That was the moment I realized something I had been denying for years. In their eyes, I was never the real child. I was the background, the afterthought, the one who didn't fit. Never mind the fact that I paid off their mortgage when my dad lost his job. Never mind the years I covered Ryan's debts just to protect our family name. None of that mattered. So I stood up, walked to the table where my father was seated, placed an envelope in front of him, and said calmly, "From the child who didn't matter. Good luck." Then I walked out. What was in that envelope? It would change everything. But not yet. They had to learn the hard way what it meant to burn the bridge, when I was the one holding it up all along. My name is Elena Harper. I'm 34 years old, a senior financial strategist living in Seattle. From the outside, my life looks clean, stable, even impressive. I manage million-dollar portfolios, help people plan their futures, and give speeches about financial boundaries at corporate retreats. But none of that seemed to matter to the people who mattered most, my own family. I was the quiet one growing up. Always the planner, the saver, the girl with a spreadsheet for her birthday party budget. I wasn't loud or flashy. I wasn't the center of attention like Ryan, my younger brother. I didn't chase validation from others. I chased stability. Maybe that's why they never really saw me. My parents were high school sweethearts, middle class, traditional values. My father worked in insurance for 35 years. My mother stayed home, hosted book clubs, volunteered at church, kept our lives tidy and predictable. But they always had a soft spot for Ryan. He was the golden child, the charismatic dreamer who could charm anyone, even when he was failing classes or maxing out credit cards. I, on the other hand, was too intense, too focused. I skipped prom to apply for a college scholarship. I got into Northwestern with a full ride and graduated top of my class. I landed a job at a prestigious investment firm straight out of school. I bought my first condo at 26, but whenever I came home, all my accomplishments were met with polite smiles and half-hearted, "That's great, honey," comments. Meanwhile, Ryan was celebrated for every small step. When he got a part-time job at a car dealership, my dad opened champagne. When he launched a clothing line with no experience, my mom posted about it daily, even after he quietly shut it down 5 months later, buried under debt. I kept my distance emotionally, but financially, I was always there. When my dad lost his job during the pandemic, I quietly wired money to cover the mortgage. When my mom's health took a dip and their insurance lapsed, I paid for her medication. When Ryan racked up another $12,000 in credit card debt, I negotiated with the collectors and handled it under my name so his credit wouldn't be destroyed. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I kept giving, they would finally see me. Spoiler, they didn't. But what they didn't realize was this. The girl they ignored, she was the one holding the floor beneath them steady. Ours was a picture-perfect family. On paper, the kind of household that looked just right in Christmas cards. Matching sweaters, warm smiles, a neatly trimmed front lawn. Behind closed doors, though, things weren't so symmetrical. They revolved around one person, Ryan. My parents didn't mean to choose favorites. At least that's what they would have said. But actions speak louder than denials, and for as long as I can remember, they made space for Ryan's mistakes while shrinking mine into invisibility. Ryan was the dreamer, the one with potential, the child my mom insisted just needed more time to find his calling. He was impulsive, charming, dramatic. He dropped out of community college after one semester, convinced he was destined to start his own media company. He never did. He worked odd jobs, bounced between roommates, dated influencers, pitched half-baked business plans to anyone who would listen. And every time he stumbled, my parents made sure he had a soft place to land. My mom cashed in her savings to cover the rent on his first apartment. My dad co-signed for 3 different business loans, none of which were paid back. When Ryan totaled his lease car after a weekend trip to Vegas, my mom told everyone it wasn't his fault. He just needs structure. Me? I was the opposite. The structure, the fallback, the emergency fund no one talked about, but everyone expected to be there. They would call me in the middle of the night, voice shaky. "Can you just help us for this month, Elena? Just until Ryan gets back on his feet." So I did, again and again. I helped them keep their house. I paid off Ryan's IRS bill to avoid legal action. I covered my mom's private hospital room when she needed surgery and their car maintenance when the brakes failed. I did it without asking for credit, and I never told my friends, not even the man I dated for 3 years, because for a long time, I believed that being a good daughter meant making sure they were okay, even if I wasn't. But that belief slowly ate away at me, especially when, at every family dinner, they bragged about Ryan's latest project and barely asked me how I was doing. I could have won an award, and they would have said, "Did you hear Ryan's thinking of writing a book?" I watched them post about him constantly on Facebook. Ryan's new apartment, Ryan's trip to Miami, Ryan's handmade business cards. I never saw a single post about me getting promoted to senior strategist or about the nonprofit I launched to help women out of debt. And yet, every time their world cracked, it was my phone that rang, never his. I wasn't angry, not yet. I just felt tired, hollow, like a safety net stretched too far for too long. Then one night, during a family dinner I shouldn't have attended, I heard the sentence that broke the illusion completely. "We're thinking of selling the house," my mom said casually, "to invest in Ryan's new venture. He's finally got something promising lined up." I blinked. "You mean your retirement home?" She nodded, smiling. My dad chimed in. "He just needs a little push, and who better to help manage the funds than you, right?" That was the moment I realized they didn't see me as a daughter. I was a walking checkbook with a pulse, and something inside me shifted. It happened during my mother's 60th birthday dinner, a large, showy affair at her favorite restaurant, the kind with white tablecloths, overpriced cocktails, and a string quartet playing softly in the background. Ryan planned the entire thing. Well, Ryan and my parents' credit card. He made a speech about how much our mother meant to the family, how she had been the anchor of our lives. People clapped, laughed, and dabbed their eyes with napkins. Then came the toast from my father. A moment I'll never forget. He stood up with a glass of wine, smiling wide. "I just want to say how proud I am of this family, of Ryan, especially," he said, patting Ryan's back. "He's the one carrying our legacy. He's always been the one with the vision." Everyone nodded. My aunt whispered, "He's so talented." My uncle raised his glass. My mother beamed. Then my dad continued, as if reading from a script written years ago. "Elena's always been dependable. We're grateful, of course, but Ryan, he's the dreamer, the risk taker. That's who moves the world forward." I sat frozen. Not one word about my career, not about the thousands I had poured into their lives over the past decade. Not about the sacrifices I made so Ryan could fail safely. Just dependable. Like a dishwasher. Then, like a cruel punchline, my father laughed and added, "She's the type who probably has a 5-year spreadsheet for her groceries." Everyone chuckled, including Ryan. I smiled politely, but inside, something snapped. When the cake arrived, Ryan leaned over and said, Dad told me you're going to help manage the transfer of the house funds into my company account? Cool, right? I blinked at him. Excuse me? He grinned. They're finally letting me take the lead. You'll handle the legal stuff like you always do. It's kind of your thing. And that's when I understood. They had already decided. The house my parents bought with my help, the mortgage I covered secretly for nearly a year, was being sold to fund another one of Ryan's fantasy startups, and I was expected to handle the logistics like a loyal assistant. No one had even asked me, not a single person had bothered to include me in the conversation. I didn't make a scene, I didn't shout or flip the table or storm out. Instead, I quietly got up, walked over to my father and handed him a slim envelope. For you, I said. From your dependable daughter. He looked surprised, confused. What's this? Just something I've been saving for the right time. And then I left. I walked out of that restaurant, into the cold Seattle night, without looking back. Inside the envelope was a single-page legal document, signed and notarized. It formally revoked the power of attorney they had quietly slipped into my hands years ago. The one they assumed I'd use to help them sell the house. Without it, they had no legal path forward. The house was still in both of their names, but without my signature, no financial action could be taken on it. And the best part? They didn't even realize it yet. I didn't cry when I got home. That surprised me. You'd think after being erased in public by the people who raised you, something inside would crack, but it didn't. Not that night. Instead, I sat on my balcony, wrapped in my softest blanket, sipping cold tea and staring out at the quiet San Francisco skyline. The ache wasn't loud. It was slow, like a leak in your chest you don't notice until you try to breathe. I wasn't mourning the money, not the down payments I'd quietly made. Not the emergency loans I gave them to cover Ryan's past mistakes, not even the business fund I helped them assemble when they wanted to retire early and follow their dreams of flipping homes. I was mourning something deeper. The illusion. I had spent my adult life convincing myself that love, real love, meant giving without expecting, that if I gave enough, they'd eventually see me, maybe even thank me. Instead, they saw me as a resource, a useful extension of their needs. And Ryan, he was the dream they had always wanted, the golden boy, the one who couldn't hold a job for more than a year but somehow still got the benefit of the doubt. Even now, with credit card debt in his name, failed ventures, and a trail of angry investors, they still handed him the steering wheel. What did they say I was again? Dependable. Such a dangerous compliment. A word that sounds kind, but cuts deep. It means you're only valuable when you're useful, that your worth is based on how well you serve others, that the minute you stop giving, you stop mattering. That night, I opened a locked folder on my computer. It was where I kept records. Not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. Bank statements, loan agreements, email threads showing my contributions, screenshots of texts where I transferred money just until Dad's check clears. Even the document that proved I co-signed for their house. And the one where I declined to put my name on the business Ryan launched with their blessing and my savings. I read them all, not to reassure myself. I already knew the truth. I read them as a goodbye. Because I was done playing the part of the helpful daughter, done cleaning up messes that weren't mine, done giving second, third, 10th chances. They wanted to sell the house to fund Ryan's next gamble? Let them figure it out. They wanted me to manage the logistics, the finances, the fallout. Let them call a stranger. Because I was finished being dependable. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't send a dramatic email. I just stopped. And when they realized what that meant, it wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet. Like a house with no lights, no heat, no plan. They had taught me to handle everything. Now they'd see what it looked like when I handled nothing. 3 days after the birthday dinner disaster, I got a call from Aunt Valerie. She wasn't really my aunt, just Mom's closest childhood friend, the kind who'd been at every holiday, every school play, every awkward milestone. She'd always had a warm smile and a way of knowing when to step in without overstepping. I heard what happened, she said gently, and I just need you to know, I was there. I saw everything. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. She continued, her voice calm but edged with something sharper. I saw the way they looked at you, like you were an intruder at your own table. That sentence stuck in my mind for days. An intruder at your own table. It felt too accurate, But then she said something that made my hands freeze on my coffee mug. "I also know about the trust fund." I blinked. "What trust fund?" She paused. "Your grandmother, your dad's mother, she left you something about 15 years ago. A fund in your name. Not Ryan's, not your parents. Just you." I didn't believe her at first, but Valerie wasn't one for drama. She wasn't the type to stir the pot unless the pot was boiling over. "She told me herself," she said you were the only one who really listened to her near the end. She wanted to help you go to grad school or start a business or whatever your future looked like, but your parents said they'd manage it until you were ready." My stomach twisted. "I thought you knew," she added softly. "But when I saw how they treated you the other night, I realized you probably didn't." I spent the next 48 hours in a haze of research, phone calls, and legal threads. And, sure enough, after a few rounds of pressure and a call to the estate attorney listed on Grandma Ruth's will, it was confirmed. There had been a trust, and it had been cashed out 10 years ago by my parents. They used my social security number, claimed it was for family investments, and filed the documentation under a family shell company, one Ryan later listed as a failed business on his LinkedIn. $82,000. Vanished into whatever poor decision or sinking ship Ryan had tried to captain last. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest, not just because of the money, but because of the story it told. They hadn't just chosen him once. They had chosen him again. And again, and again, even when it meant lying, even when it meant stealing from their own daughter. And the worst part? They never even thought they'd have to explain it, because they assumed I'd never ask, because I was dependable. But now, I had proof. I gathered every email, every transfer, every date and signature. I hired a financial advisor and a lawyer. I started building a timeline, not for revenge, not yet, but because I knew what was coming next. They were going to come back when the money ran out, when the business failed, when Ryan's charm no longer translated into credibility or cash. And this time, I'd be ready, not to help, but to finally speak. Not for them, for myself. Because I was done being the family's backup plan. They had gambled everything on my brother. Now they were going to learn what it meant to lose. There's a moment, right before a dam breaks, where the pressure becomes unbearable, but everything still looks calm on the surface. That was me. Outwardly, I was still showing up to work, still hitting my deadlines, still mentoring junior associates. But inside, I was holding a silence so heavy, it felt like it could split me in two. I had the documents, I had the proof, I knew what they'd taken, and I knew exactly how they'd done it. And yet, some old reflex in me kept whispering, "Don't rock the boat. Don't burn the bridge. They're still your parents." But they weren't acting like parents. They were acting like people who had made a calculated bet, and I was the chip they'd cashed in without consent. I realized then that silence wasn't grace, it was permission. Every time I stayed quiet, every time I bailed them out, every time I let them rewrite the story, I was giving them permission to keep doing it. No more. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't need shouting matches or teary confessions. I wanted accountability, so I did 3 things. First, I filed a report with the State Financial Fraud Division. Quietly, without drama. I wasn't sure if it would stick. Statutes of limitation are messy, but I needed a record on file. Second, I froze all access to any accounts they could still touch. The joint credit line I had left open, just in case, closed. The investment account I had co-signed for Ryan years ago, revoked and flagged for audit. The utilities I had still been paying for at their house, out of habit, disconnected. And third, I drafted a letter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was just clear. I laid out what I knew: the trust fund, the false documents, the years of financial abuse disguised as family obligation. I explained that I would not be attending any future family events, that all financial ties were severed, that I would be pursuing full legal control over anything that still linked me to their accounts or assets. And I ended with one line: I spent most of my adult life trying to prove I was worthy of being included. Now I realize I was never the one who needed to change. I sent it via registered mail. No email, no text. No way for them to pretend they didn't get it. And then I waited. Waited for the silence to turn into panic. Waited for the dam to break. Not because I wanted to see them suffer, but because I wanted them to finally see the cost of building a foundation on someone else's sacrifice. The girl who never said no had just walked away, and this time she wasn't coming back. It started with an email, then a phone call, then 3 more. Not from my parents, from Ryan. Apparently, things were unraveling. The day after I mailed the letter, Ryan had an investor meeting. One of his early-stage funders, a man named George Latimer, had requested updated financial disclosures. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a routine check-in. But George was meticulous, and he didn't appreciate surprises. He'd received an anonymous packet that morning. Inside, a copy of Ryan's falsified investment documents, the ones where he listed me, his silent investor, as a backer of his company, complete with a forged signature and a laughably fake LinkedIn endorsement quote, supposedly from me. He'd used my name to secure $70,000 in seed money, and now it was all about to unravel. I wasn't the one who sent the packet, but I had a good guess who did. Turns out the state financial department did take my complaint seriously. And, while the case was still in review, someone had decided the information needed to get in the right hands. Fast. Ryan's company didn't implode instantly, but the headlines trickled in. Local startup caught in investor fraud allegations. Tech founder accused of falsifying backing credentials. And then, the big one. Family feud leads to financial scandal. That last one included my name. Not because I went public. I hadn't spoken to a single journalist. But someone, probably one of the investors, leaked my name as the person who discovered the fraud. And just like that, I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was the whistleblower. At first, I panicked. I didn't want this kind of attention. I didn't want my name tangled up in their mess. But something shifted when the messages started rolling in, quiet ones, from women I barely knew. Co-workers, former classmates, one of my mom's old friends. They all said the same thing. I saw the article. I'm sorry you went through that. I had no idea. That took guts. My brother did something similar. No one believed me either. For the first time, I wasn't just the family scapegoat. I was someone other people saw, clearly, fully, for what I had survived. Meanwhile, my parents were scrambling. Their phone numbers showed up on my screen, like ghosts from a life I had already buried. I didn't answer, but I read the voicemail from my mother. Elena, honey, we didn't know it had gone that far. You should have told us. If you just come over, we can talk this out. You can't let strangers ruin your brother's future. I almost laughed. Strangers? My own name, my own voice, my own silence had finally held more weight than decades of their manipulation. They weren't worried about Ryan's lies. They were worried about their reputation. They were worried the mask was cracking, and everyone could finally see what lived beneath. So, I made a decision. I didn't show up at their house. I didn't confront them in person. I didn't even return their calls. Instead, I accepted an invitation. A friend of mine, Lila, ran a nonprofit focused on ethical entrepreneurship. She invited me to speak at their upcoming conference. The theme? Integrity in Innovation. I said yes. I didn't name names. I didn't rant. I stood on that stage in a navy blazer and told the story of a woman who had been used as a stepping stone until she became the wall someone crashed into. I talked about financial boundaries. I talked about the myth of unconditional family loyalty, and I ended with a quote that I had written in my journal the night I cut them off. When people show you what you're worth to them, believe them the first time. The clip of that speech hit 2.3 million views within a week, not because I was famous, but because I had said what too many people were afraid to, and for the first time, I felt the power of not needing revenge, just truth. After the video of my speech went viral, the fallout reached my family faster than I expected. Ryan went quiet on social media. His LinkedIn profile vanished. His company's website redirected to a placeholder page. Investors began pulling out. Articles were updated. Startup in trouble. After financial misconduct comes to light, his friends, the ones who used to tag him in startup success memes and beach selfies, went silent. But the true shift happened at home. My mother called 3 times in one night. Then, she sent a message. "We didn't know the full story. Please come home. We need to talk." I didn't respond. A few days later, I received an email from my father, a man who, 2 months ago, told me I was overreacting and should stop holding a grudge. The subject line, "We need help." The tone was different now. He admitted their accounts had been frozen. Their savings, once tied to Ryan's startup shares, were worthless. Their mortgage was overdue. Ryan had gone quiet, not returning their calls, and the stress was making my mom physically ill. No apology, no recognition of what they had done to me, just fear, just panic, and a request. Could I step in? Could I once again be the adult in the room? I stared at that message for a long time. 10 minutes passed, then 30. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just grieved, because that email wasn't from parents reaching out in love. It was from people who only valued me when I was fixing something for them. And this time, I had nothing left to give. Still, there was a part of me, deeply conditioned, deeply wounded, that wanted to respond, to offer a path forward, to extend grace. But then I remembered, I already had. I'd spent decades offering grace. I'd covered bills. I'd buried pain. I'd shown up even when they didn't deserve it. And they repaid me with silence, with betrayal, with dismissal. So I did something I'd never done before. I ignored them. No message, no reply. Just a soft final closing of the door, and for the first time, the quiet felt powerful. Later that week, my cousin Maya, one of the few relatives who had watched everything unfold without judgment, sent me a photo. It was from a family gathering, something casual, a barbecue. My parents were sitting off to the side, eyes down, plates barely touched. No matching outfits, no staged group photos, just 2 people who looked lost in the world they helped destroy. She texted, "It's different now. No one talks about Ryan like they used to. And honestly, everyone's wondering what you're going to do next." I read that text twice, then put my phone down. Because the truth was, I wasn't planning anything. I was simply living, not out of spite, not for revenge, just for myself. And that was enough. The downfall of Ryan's empire happened in slow motion, painfully public and entirely avoidable. A month after my video aired, his startup officially collapsed. Investors pulled out completely. The bridge round funding never materialized. Employees started posting anonymous reviews online, talking about missed paychecks and broken promises. Then came the lawsuits. 2 former employees filed legal action, claiming they were misled about the company's financial stability. One accused Ryan of using company funds for personal purchases. News outlets picked it up, small at first, then nationally. Words like fraud, embezzlement, and negligence were used. No one was defending him anymore. He stopped showing his face at networking events. Even his once loyal co-founder publicly distanced himself. My parents, meanwhile, spiraled alongside him. The mortgage on their house, the same one they'd used as collateral to help Ryan, was nearing foreclosure. Their credit cards were maxed out. They sold their second car, then the furniture from the guest room. My father picked up a part-time consulting gig, but at 67, he wasn't exactly in demand. My mother's friends stopped visiting. The family group chat, silent. Everything they had built, status, image, pride, crumbled under the weight of their blind loyalty. It was poetic, really. Not because I wanted them to suffer. I didn't. But because for once, they had to sit in the mess they helped create. No one was coming to clean it up for them. And most haunting of all, Ryan never reached out. He ghosted the very people who defended him to the end, the ones who handed him everything, even when he deserved nothing. I heard from Maya that he had moved to a different city, staying with a business partner, trying to rebuild quietly, but no one was buying what he was selling anymore. His credibility was gone. Reputation burned, and my parents, who once thought of me as reliable but replaceable, were left holding the shattered pieces of their golden boy. I didn't gloat. I didn't post follow-ups. I simply stayed quiet, continued building my new life, and let the silence speak louder than any speech ever could. Because when someone shows you your worth only when they need something from you, that's not family. That's dependence dressed up as love. And finally, they had to learn that lesson without me. I didn't plan for a new life. I just walked toward peace, and it met me halfway. After leaving Boston, I moved to a quiet, sunlit apartment in Boulder, Colorado, a place where people smiled in coffee shops without asking questions, where my name didn't come with baggage, and no one compared me to anyone else. It was the first time in years I woke up without the weight of someone else's expectations sitting on my chest. I joined a mid-sized consulting firm, leading their financial ethics team. My past wasn't a stain. It was experience. My new boss told me in our first meeting, "We need someone who knows what happens when good people get taken for granted." I smiled. "You've come to the right place." In the evenings, I started a newsletter, The Quiet Ones, a space for women in finance, especially those raised to believe loyalty means sacrifice. I wrote about boundaries, betrayal, and rebuilding. Subscribers grew faster than I expected. I received messages like, "I didn't even know someone else had lived what I lived. Thank you for showing me it's okay to walk away. I used to think silence was weakness. Now I know it's power." I was finally being seen, not as someone's sister or someone's backup plan, but as someone with a voice. Not long after, a podcast invited me on, then a speaking engagement at a women's leadership summit, then a book deal. I wasn't chasing validation. I was just telling the truth. And somehow, that was enough. I kept to myself, mostly. I didn't post about my family or share updates on their unraveling. That wasn't mine to tell anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just done. Done explaining my worth. Done fixing things I didn't break. Done pouring myself into people who only noticed me when they needed something. I learned how to cook for one, how to laugh without guilt, how to choose quiet over chaos. And on my 34th birthday, I threw a party, not because I wanted gifts or attention, but because I wanted to mark the moment I stopped asking for a seat at the table and built my own instead. The room was filled with new friends, kind people, and voices that lifted instead of silenced. No drama, no demands, just music, laughter, and light, exactly the way I liked it. People think revenge needs to be loud, explosive, dramatic, but mine was none of those things. Mine was silence. Mine was success they couldn't take credit for. Mine was peace they couldn't interrupt. A few weeks after my birthday, I received a letter, handwritten, folded carefully. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. Inside, just one photo, an old one. Me and my brother, maybe 10 and 14, sitting on the porch. I was holding a paper certificate. First place in a math contest. He was looking away. I was beaming. On the back of the photo, in faint ink, a message. "I'm sorry, we didn't see you." That was it. No apology for the years of erasure, no mention of the inheritance, no acknowledgement of the nights I stayed up trying to pay their bills while pretending I was fine. Just one sentence. And you know what? It was enough. Not because it fixed anything, not because it healed everything, but because it confirmed what I already knew. They had finally realized who I was, too late to benefit from it. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Closure didn't come in a letter. It came the moment I stopped waiting for one. It came the day I chose myself. They gave everything to my brother, and in doing so, they taught me how to give everything to myself. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And maybe that's the lesson I was always meant to learn, that sometimes being overlooked isn't a punishment. It's a permission slip to stop shrinking, to stop fixing, to stop hoping they'll change, and to start building a life where you never have to beg to be seen again. It's been a year since that letter, a year since I stood at the edge of my past, read their last attempt at reaching out, and quietly folded it shut. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I placed it in the back of a drawer, behind tax files and old postcards. Not to hold on to it, but to remind myself of how far I've come. Some memories don't belong in frames. They belong in drawers, tucked away, not forgotten, just finished. Last week, I walked past a cafe where I once waited for 2 hours, hoping my mother would show up for lunch. She never did. Back then, I told myself she was just busy, that she forgot, that maybe she'd make it up to me. Now, I don't need her to. Now, I buy my own coffee. I sit where I like. I don't check the door, because I've stopped waiting for people who never chose me. My life is quieter now. Not empty, not lonely, just quieter. My apartment is small, but filled with sunlight. My calendar is full of meetings, but none of them with people who make me feel invisible. My heart is open, but guarded. Not hard, just wiser. Sometimes I still wonder if they regret it, giving everything to someone who gambled it away, forgetting the child who never asked for anything, but would have given them everything if they had only asked with kindness. But then I remember, their regret isn't my responsibility. Their mess isn't my cleanup duty. Their brokenness doesn't get to rewrite my wholeness. I didn't get justice in the way movies show it. No courtroom, no confrontation, no slow clapping scene where I walk away victorious. But I got something better. I got my life back. And that, for me, is more than enough. If someone watching this knows the pain of being the forgotten one, the dismissed one, the one who stayed quiet too long, just know, you are allowed to be loud now. You are allowed to take up space, and you don't have to prove your worth to anyone who was too blind to see it. Let them beg. Let them learn. You rise.